Hello, welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. Today we'll be chatting about anticipating working motherhood, cultural intentionality in raising interracial children, and intuition with Dana Paulita Harmon. Dana is a product development engineer for Georgia Pacific within the Innovation and R&D division. She provides technical support to manufacturing sites in the development of GP bleached board products. Dana graduated with a bachelor's in chemical and biomolecular engineering and as a Division I cheerleader in 2019. Dana is expecting her first child in 2021 this year with her husband Wilson. Outside of work, she is a lifestyle content creator and her handle will be tagged on Instagram, and I'll be inviting her on now. Hello, can you hear me all
Hi.
right?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much for joining me. And for anyone in your audience who has no idea who I am, hello everyone. I'm Ricky. I'm a graduate student at Georgia Tech. I study aerospace engineering and I'm currently working in the urban air mobility division. Because I'm a triple minority in the aerospace industry with being a foreign national, a woman, person of color, wellness has been essential to me, and I really feel as though for minorities in STEM, taking care of ourselves first and foremost, spiritually, physically, mentally, everything. Must come first, which is why I host these chats. So thank you so much for being here with me. And um, let me see. I would love for you to start with a introduction about yourself. That's a sentence, something that I haven't said already in your official bio. Anything quirky or catchy? Yeah.
Sure, I'll take a crack at it. I am Dana. I am an immigrant, multi-passionate mom to be who happens to hang out a lot with her best friend slash husband Wilson and is also a dog mom to Addie and Miles.
I
Very
love
long sentence, but that's that I think that captures me.
No, thank you so much. Okay, my next question is, um, in what specific way do you want your work in STEM to make a difference? And how has your specific school research work combination helped to manifest this interest?
Yeah, so I will start off saying that my uh, start in STEM didn't actually start until I was already in college. So I did graduate with a chemical and biomolecular engineering degree from Georgia Tech, but I actually started out as a public policy major. After one semester of that, I realized that maybe that wasn't where I really needed to be, started looking at other areas. Chemical engineering was really cool to me because at the time I was like, okay, cool, like I like solving problems, and this has a mix of science too that I really wanted to be in my curriculum. But the more I went throughout my degree and now working as a chemical engineer, something that I'm really grateful for about pursuing chemical engineering is that it really just makes you very process minded and very process oriented. So as far as, what impact I want to have using my STEM background, I think it comes down to just making things work or, um, making processes a lot better, a lot more user friendly, a lot more intuitive, right? And that can be any process in my day-to-day job in product development, that makes sure we are going about things the right way to make quality products. But it can also mean, within innovation, finding those solutions in the best way possible, in the most efficient way possible. In my personal life, that could mean, how am I approaching, my marriage, my partnership in the best way I can? How am I preparing for motherhood in the best way I can? So I think, again, a long-winded way of answering, just leaning into my process-oriented mind within STEM has really just taken advantage of my natural affinities in a way that I can apply it to my job and anywhere else. Um, so
Yeah, I absolutely love that answer. And I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to that as well, like applying what they've kind of like who they are as an engineer to
yeah,
who they are in life. And like it's such a holistic kind of view of oneself where we're not like separate. Like even if we're
yeah,
multi-passionate, like we are those things for a reason, and like all of those things like make us who we are. So I absolutely
yeah.
love that. And I would love to jump into kind of the three main topics that we're going to be chatting about. So the first one that I'd love to talk about is anticipating working motherhood. And what I'm specifically curious about, which will be really useful for just young gender minorities in STEM, like how did you go about sharing your timeline with your manager? And is there like a spiel that you can kind of walk us through so that folks listening to this later can kind of, take notes, write it down, and then when they need to, they can kind of have that conversation.
Right. And before I jump into that, I do want to say, like, if you are a mother, no matter how your mom raised you, if you plan on being a mother later on, or if you don't, if that's not in your path, totally fine. There's so many ways you can approach motherhood. Some people choose not to work, and that's fine. I am choosing to continue working after I give birth, and that could change too, right? Once we have a child. So doing what's best for you and your family, first and foremost, I think like just laying that out there. That I'm talking on my experience, and it's not to belittle your own or how you were raised or anything like that. So now that that's out of the way, I can kind of answer your question, which is, how did I really bring this up with my manager? When I have an awesome relationship with my manager, I really lucked out. He's been supportive of me and my career plan since day one. And making the decision to start a family was no exception. He and I've been really thinking about how to bring it up with him for a while. Because last year, I think, is when Wilson and I really were considering, yeah, this is the right next step. And as as a minority or as someone as a female in the workforce, it's it's kind of scary to admit you want to start a family because you don't want to be discounted right away. You don't want anyone making your future career choices for you as soon as they know that about you. So at first I was really hesitant to bring it up, but in my head, I started thinking about it and I'm like, well, the only way I can take ownership of my career later on with or without a family, but in this case with, is by, you know, being really intentional about my approach. So even before I found out I was pregnant, I talked to my manager. I was like, hey, this is something that I want in the future, and it's probably going to be in the near future if we're lucky, in which we were. And he just starting that conversation and telling him that the reason I'm bringing it up now is so that we can be forward thinking about what my career is going to look like, what the transition is during my pregnancy, into my leave, and what it's going to look like after I come back from leave and continue on in my career. I was very lucky to have a very receptive manager. Like he listened to all my fears and also all my aspirations about being a working mom. And I think just having that conversation early on, being honest and being candid about what you're afraid of is just as important as like standing up for yourself and saying, "Oh, I can do everything," right? Because at the end of the day, like no matter where you work, you want to have that kind of support system built up. And the only way you can have one that truly serves you is being open and candid about everything. Um, so after I had built up that conversation, it was really easy to tell. He was actually like the second or third person that I told after I found out. Like it was me, Wilson, like my sister, my manager. Because again, it was like the quicker he knows, the quicker he can help me think through what the next few months are going to be, and also what different career paths might fit in well with how I want to be as a working mom.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of my biggest takeaways for that, is just scheduling a meeting as soon as you mentally know that this is something that you want. So working through that fear of first reaching out and then asking questions pertaining to the timeline of working motherhood and um, really normalizing that conversation because I think a lot of the fear surrounds the fact that oh, this person may not understand or this, like you shared, like may make assumptions about me, but just going in um, with the belief that like you're going to get the best out of that conversation. You're going to get answers about what that timeline is going to look like, and someone is going to work with you and help you out. Because like if you don't, you're again like it's a disservice to yourself if you like don't um, like if you're not confident with that conversation. I think a lot of the things that I've read online or seen on TV work around just the feelings of like anxiousness surrounding just having that conversation
Yeah.
because not only are you so I think there's this whole thing of you assuming that they're not going to understand and that they're going to make assumptions about you. So it's like so many assumptions, so much overthinking. So thank you for kind of breaking the ice on that and like just sharing what you did. I think that's so
Yeah.
helpful for younger engineers.
Yeah, and something I do want to add is, it's up to your comfortability too, because a lot of people don't share until later on because they're not even sure if the pregnancy is going to carry to term, right? And that's a completely personal choice because, pregnancy loss is very hard. But again, uh, how I viewed it is, I'd rather have these people who are close to me know just so I do have that support if it goes in that direction. So that's everything. I'm learning very quickly that everything with regards to pregnancy is motherhood is really very personal, right? Like it really is going to be what feels right to you. And I feel like that's pretty much what wellness is. So it kind of ties well in this chat. But yeah, I think just finding out what you are comfortable with as far as approaching that situation, and then going for whatever feels right. Um, and hopefully you are lucky like me and have an awesome manager and an awesome support system at work that, celebrates, all these choices, not just for your career, but also in your personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my next question is a little bit about, taking a step back to when your fingers are kind of hovering over the keyboard in just writing that email to schedule a meeting. I think we've talked a little bit about what the conversation would look like, but do you have any tips for like just wording on that email? Like really getting into just the details of like what feels even safe to say because that might be um, what differentiates someone from having a good, relaxed, easy experience with this conversation versus just a tougher one.
Yeah, I think for me, yeah, sending out that email to have that meeting is really important, especially now in COVID times, but definitely emphasizing that you want to have this in person, just so like you can kind of read each other, and it's just a lot more open. But as far as that email itself, I'm trying to remember what I sent to my boss. It might have been an IM, but just saying like, hey, like I have something on my mind with regards to my career that I'd like to talk to you about. That way they don't go, that doesn't sound like anything crazy, right? Like it is about your career. It's just how your personal life affects it. But I think you can disclose as much or as little as you want, but I think framing it up as, you're obviously thinking about your career. Any good manager is going to respect that and will want to, cultivate that within you. So framing it up as a career discussion, because it is I think my one thing to include in that email. And again, you can, depending on your
Or
relationship with your
Slack
manager,
message. Or, yeah,
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 just making sure it is around that because it is still like professional, right? Like it's still your work environment. So definitely highlighting that you're still thinking about your career, and that you just want to talk about it. And that's pretty much it. There's really no pressure on anyone at that point until you get there, and then you'll have that conversation and it'll go fine.
yeah. Okay. And so now just jumping a couple steps ahead, what was the feedback or advice or information you got about like taking a leave? And again, this will be so personal, but this is something that um, I'm sure is just again going to be so helpful to anyone like looking to work and like looking to take a leave. Folks just really don't know. Like I don't know, so I'm so grateful to just even hear about your experience. Like I'm learning about all of this for the first time. Just good to know, good to prepare. So yeah, what does the leave taking process um, look like for a innovation and R&D engineer at Georgia Pacific?
Yeah, so I think let's start with like with the quantitative, which is typically you'll have 6 weeks medical leave. Sometimes your company will add on a little more on that. My company did, so I have 6 weeks medical and also 6 weeks parental leave. And the 6 weeks medical is highly dependent on your due date. You can't really adjust that. The second 6 weeks is a lot more flexible. You can, I think, take as long as you take it within a year of you giving birth. That's like they can be pretty flexible about that, and you can break it up too. That's for my company. So knowing that I'm kind of a planner, and a lot of my job revolves around projects. So I was able to really think about, okay, as soon as I knew my due date, I knew due date plus 6 weeks, and then working into the fact that my husband also has parental leave, um, and also factoring in vacations and holidays. We have an October baby. We kind of lucked out because we're close to Thanksgiving and Christmas, and most corporations observe those holidays. Um, so just doing all the mental math, I literally have a Google Doc from October 4th until, February, marked off about when I'm taking leave and when Wilson's taking leave and when vacations are and when my family can come. So knowing the numbers and planning it out was the first step for me as far as communicating that with my manager. I was very flexible about it. Like obviously I couldn't, no one can, like I don't know when my baby's actually going to come out. Like, right, like they tell me a due date, but babies have their own time. So just giving my manager essentially my spreadsheet of the dates, but also including, hey, like I'm trying to figure out when to take that next 6 weeks, and communicating that, you know, I obviously want to be wrapped up with my projects and also be set up really well as far as transitioning back into projects when I'm done with my overall leave, because I didn't space them out all that much. So my full 12 are pretty close together. So and really being open about, being willing to be flexible on timing. And again, if you don't have that flexibility, that's fine. I knew I did, just because like Wilson and I talked through our schedules and we saw that, there was some wiggle room, so that if I could transition back into work at a certain time, that would make it easier for me to transition back into projects. That's the route we wanted to take. So effectively, I worked with my manager on, as far as leading up to my due date, making sure all my projects are tied up. We have a transition plan. I'm actually taking the person who is going to cover for me while I'm on leave to the plant site that I support, and making sure she's integrated with that team, and all my projects are pretty seamlessly transitioned over so that everyone feels good, right? Like no one feels um, like any kind of worry that I'm gone, and I can spend those first few weeks with our baby like not worried about work. And I think being really proactive in that and communicating when I planned on leaving was really helpful for my manager to start thinking through that and helping me with my transition plan. As far as transitioning back into work, again, I got really lucky around February. Like, the holidays tend to be kind of slow, right? Because people are on vacation, and that's when projects typically wrap up, and projects typically start for the new year around February. So that's when I was able to plan transitioning back after my parental leave, so my second 6 weeks. I could transition back into my other projects. So it worked out really well, but again, it takes a lot of communication and just flexibility on timing if you can afford that.
Yeah, I love that. And so my biggest takeaways were just, making sure you know um, what the leave policies are,
Yes.
what partners' leave policies are, um, understanding like what the workflow looks like and what the work project timelines look like, making sure your replacement is trained and you can understand like what the best way to train them is for transitioning out
Yes.
of work into your leave and then back in. Yeah, no, all of this is so helpful, and I just feel like a lot of analytical um, moms are gonna try to like do the math in their head of like, okay, this is when I should have my baby, which again you cannot plan, but like,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so I guess I have two more questions on this topic, which is planning for childcare when you're transitioning back um, in February, approximately, and just building your support system around that, asking for help, parents, friends. What does that look like, and have you begun kind of having those conversations or planning for that?
Yeah, we've definitely started thinking about it. Just because daycare wait lines are like crazy long for some reason.
No, that's not something
Um,
that they tell you ever.
yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
So like Wilson and I talked about what would best, suit our family. Um, I think for the first year of, baby's life, we would want someone at home. So like a nanny, for example. Um, just because like one, daycares have a long wait line, and also two, like, because we anticipate one of us probably working from home, um, like I think it's just easier to have someone watching your child at your home so that you don't have to go out from your work from home station, pick them up, drop them off. So it was all very practical how we're planning childcare. We do have, my parents are about 2 hours away. His mom's about an hour away. Um, and I'm sure they'll help out when they can, but they also have jobs. So for the most part, Wilson and I are kind of trying to figure out this care system together. And we found that, at least nannying for about a year and then transitioning them into daycare just for the socialization aspect of it. And also, I personally like just having like lesson plans. Like, that's a really appealing thing to me about daycare, is like usually sometimes it involves some kind of learning activity that, we may not be able to provide at home, especially if we're working. Um,
Or be equipped to, yeah, because it's like
yeah,
not your job.
yeah. So, we're still looking at different options, obviously. And again, we are very fortunate that we can even entertain having like a nanny come every day with us. Sometimes that's not the most, like affordable option. And we're weighing that too, because like we're trying to be reasonable with, providing care, but also living within our means. It is tricky. Like we've talked to a lot of our friends who have either nannied or we don't have a lot of friends who have a child, but the one we do, like I've been talking to her about like how she's handled that. And there's, again, a bunch of different ways to do that, but right now that's what we're thinking. Um, Also, like, Georgia Pacific has a daycare in the building, so that's kind of nice. So
Yeah, that's really
eventually when everyone's back in the office, like that's probably the same timing that we'll want to put them in daycare. So works out.
okay. Yeah, and so curious about just kind of like the trade studies that you've done to like weigh out all these options. Was one of the options just more obvious to you? Like, did it kind of just stick out, or did you have to begin to do research in some way, or like ask around? How did you even begin to, yeah, just understand what was practical?
I think so. Usually the two options are really like external childcare or, one of the parents stays at home. I think those are really the two things we considered. But pretty quickly Wilson and I realized like we're both really passionate about our jobs. We're in a good spot. We're progressing well in our career. That wasn't something that he and I were ready to, transition out of right now. So we were willing to look at the other options. Who knows down the line, like we have no idea what our family's going to need until like baby's here and like we're seeing our dynamic, and we'll make that decision when we get there. But I think that was really the two options we weighed, was like whether one of us was going to stay at home or we were going to do childcare, and we chose childcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that because, like, again, it's for new parents or just younger engineers, when progressing in your career just feels like the most important thing ever. It's hard to go about like having these conversations. And then again, with like intersectionality, our cultures teach us certain things, and
Mhm.
our partners' cultures teach them certain things. And um, I like to think of it as kind of like the iPhone flip phone example, where like the iPhone is like the updated version. So we'll have updated thoughts on what we want to do as just women and working. So, um, yeah, thank you for sharing that because, again, it's so helpful and illuminating, even just for myself. Like, what should I be thinking about? What are the options? Because, um, it's not always everything that you're talking about might feel so intuitive to you, but um, it's just not always muddled. Especially again, like given this is like API, like Heritage Month, it's not always muddled for us. We don't uh, necessarily have a guidebook.
Yeah.
On asking for leave, on talking to our managers, on transitioning back in, on like navigating childcare.
Yeah.
So yeah, so much for chatting about that. So we have two more topics. The first one being cultural intentionality in raising interracial children. My question with this is, what are things that you have to be mindful of in bringing a mixed child into the world, and just your personal experiences and take on that? Because again, this is also personal and subjective.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties into, the previous section as far as one, like being pregnant and going into motherhood and then also carrying it over into, the life of our child. I will say like from a cultural perspective, so like my mom worked, so that kind of probably influenced me. And also we had a caretaker at home. That's a lot more common in the Philippines than maybe it is here. So that was really like that was natural for me to suggest. And when I talked to my mom about it, she was like, "Oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense." Like
Yeah,
I wasn't given any kind of grief about it. Um, Now translating that into, okay, baby's actually born, they're mixed race. Um, I think the cultural intentionality is actually the perfect way of saying it, because it's just like being mindful that they're a mixed child, but they live in America. So, assimilation, they're gonna have American culture in them, and their dad is white. So it's really on my end that I have to be a lot more intentional about it, because like I've lived in the States for a while. Like I immigrated when I was 7, so for most of my life I've been in the States. But that doesn't mean, I reject who I am and my culture. That would be silly, because my parents still like, talk to me in Tagalog. We still eat Filipino food. And that's something that I obviously want to carry on for my child. So how I've been talking about it with Wilson, and Wilson has been, amazing at, respecting my culture from the beginning, and parenthood is, no exception. So, we have, bought books about, like my first words in Tagalog, like definitely incorporating it in there. And then Wilson and honestly me too, like I'm having to kind of relearn Tagalog because I want to be able to teach our child that, and with him along my side so that he doesn't feel like left out either. And again, like he's the one almost pushing for it, right? And that just that alone has been really wonderful. Having a partner that celebrates your culture too. Um, and another tangible example is like exposing them to, Filipino food. Food is so important in many cultures, and my mom is an awesome cook, so they're definitely going to have it there when they're visiting their grandparents. But being mindful that they're exposed to everything that I grew up with, um, is a huge part of it. And also, like oddly enough, during pregnancy, one of my cravings has been just like meals from my childhood. So I'm now having to text my mom, like, hey, mom, like, how do I make this? So I get kind of that training too, and hopefully I'll be able to transfer it over for my baby. Um, the other thing that I think is important to say is like, depending on how the genetic pool turns out, our kid might be white passing. And how are we being intentional to one, tell them the privilege that comes with that, and also reminding them that, just because you look a certain way or just because someone, like anyone, looks a certain way doesn't mean we ignore who they really are or disrespect any other part of them, right? So that's something that Wilson and I are still constantly talking through. We don't know how it's going to end up, but just being mindful that that is a possibility and trying to be as prepared for it as possible so that our child grows up being, understanding and, just aware of their privilege if they do end up white passing rather than, looking more like me or looking mixed.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important. And I'm so glad that you shared that because those are very real concerns that um, like parents have. And just particularly with the racial reckoning happening everywhere, I genuinely think that should be at the forefront of everyone's minds, like everyone's minds, like how they're
Yeah.
treating. Um, and so, yeah, I'm just so glad that you're talking about that and making sure we think about those things as engineers analytically. um, and yeah, that it's in the equation because so often it had it been in the equation for so many people, right, we wouldn't have some of the issues
Yeah.
that we do have. So thank you for speaking to that.
Yeah.
So the last topic is intuition and combining intuition with proper planning and everything else that you've been talking about for the bigger decisions in your life. What tips do you have in terms of having that gut feeling about, okay, this really feels like that next step that I know I must take, but then grappling with the fact that sometimes it's either not modeled by the folks around us or it's not modeled at this age and there's not that many people to talk to, maybe. How have you held on to that intuition and like been able to follow through um, without the mental drama and from a wellness perspective, perceiving it as like, okay, what would this look like if it was easy or it flowed for me or I focused on my well-being and not and didn't overthink these things.
Yeah, sure. And I will start off saying like I am a huge planner, and if pregnancy and this road to motherhood has taught me anything is that you can't always plan for things. So that's why I've really had to rely on my intuition. Is like as well as I can plan something, if I also lean into my intuition, if something goes wrong with that plan, I'm still a lot more prepared, right? If I've tapped into my intuition from the beginning in that planning process, I'm going to be ready, even if I'm not ready. So just leaning into that. And I think that's kind of how I've reconciled it. Because I mean, I used to be the kind of person that like something does not go according to plan, or like there's no plan at all, and I'm just like thrown for a loop. And life doesn't work that way. Like it really doesn't. But I know how I react, and I know how I can handle things, no matter how they turn out. And that's because I rely really heavily on my intuition. So that I can apply that to a lot of situations, whether that's, knowing what the next step for me is post grad, like knowing that this was the right company, or, more relevant now, like knowing that no one's ever really ready for parenthood, but for me and Wilson, it felt right. Like that is all intuition, truly. Um, and I think just reconciling that, if you trust yourself, if you have that intuition built in, like it doesn't matter if things go wrong, because you can trust yourself to figure it out along the way. I think that has been my biggest takeaway. And I don't know if that answers your question, but that's really how I've used my intuition, is just honestly to help me figure it out when I have nothing else to hold on to figure it out.
Yeah, I love that. And I think in terms of handling indecision or uncertainty is just this, like combating that with this deep belief in yourself that
Yeah.
like no matter what, like I still have me and I'm gonna figure this out. I think the problem arises when folks don't have that trust and don't have that deep rooted belief that they will figure it out. And I think that's so essential to illuminate, because okay, that's like step zero before you can even start to rely on your intuition. It's like it's more so a game of trusting yourself and
Yeah.
building that trust with yourself with like personal integrity and all those things.
And I will say, sorry, I think my AirPods are. So hold on. I still
Yes, I can still
hear you anymore.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
Sorry,
perfect.
it was literally dying.
No, you're totally fine. Okay, so I have two more questions for you. The first one being, can you tell me a little bit about your morning and night routine currently, amidst pregnancy as an engineer, who's on a project, and what helps you bounce back when you fall off track? Like, what are the kinds of things that help you extend compassion to yourself when, as a planner, things are not going according to plan?
Yeah, so I will say my morning and night routine is wildly different now that I'm pregnant. Something that has stayed consistent though is that I press snooze at least once every morning. Um, but luckily, I mean, we wake up pretty early in our house just with the dogs. But definitely trying to not press snooze more than once, but allowing my body rest because I am building a human, and giving myself grace for that. Um, Wash my face in the morning, take the dogs on a walk. Wilson and I always try to eat breakfast together. We try to eat most meals together, which has been awesome from just like working from home. And as far as my night routine, same kind of thing. Dogs on a walk. Wilson and I always have dinner together. At least we try to. And wash my face, put on some vitamin C serum, and go to bed. We go to bed really early. We don't do a lot at night. We go to bed at like 9. And
Okay,
typically
yeah. So you
I'm
spend
much
9,
sleepier during pregnancy before
what
then,
about do you wake up?
like 6. So
Okay, yeah,
like
that makes
I am pretty
that
early,
checks
but
out. Okay, perfect. So the last question for you is, what does wellness mean to you as a um, mother to be and engineer and content creator and everything in between?
yeah, I think, you know, wellness to me means just taking care of yourself, like mind, body, and soul. Very, very basic.
meaning of wellness, right? But if something, let's say something doesn't serve you anymore, whether that's your workout routine or maybe a project you've been on or how you're approaching a project or how you've been communicating with your spouse, like that's, if it's not working for you, no matter how long you've done it that way, it's time to change. And that for me, just like being flexible and gracious with myself about things not going to plan, even my own behaviors and reactions to things, then it's time to address that and pick something that would serve me better and take care of me better. I think that's what wellness means to me, is just offering myself grace and patience to fully take care of myself in every capacity, even if it requires stepping away from my plan or anyone else's plan for me.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And those are really all my questions. And I guess I just wanted to um, let you share any final thoughts you had, any lingering comments, or anything else that you'd like to share with the audience.
Yeah. No, I'm just grateful for being here. And if you have any questions about, careers and engineering, careers and motherhood, anything, you just want to get coffee, I'll have to drink decaf, but I'm always down. But yeah, thank you so much, Ricky, for, having me on and letting me kind of explore these topics myself, because I don't really get to think about them
No,
too
of
often.
course. I just want to tell you like how valuable your insights are because they're coming from um, just the perspective of someone who is analytical, who's done the planning, who's done the research, who's thought these things through, and um, you're not just like throwing things around and throwing like ideas around. Like we can just tell that you've like spent a lot of time like thinking about it, having honest conversations with the important people in your life and your manager and your partner, and um, like you can just be like the model for people who don't have that, like who don't know how to even begin comprehending how to balance like motherhood with a career, but your approach makes it feel possible for people, right? And it's something that can feel so daunting, especially for like minorities, where the answer often is that it has to be given up, and then particularly with the pandemic and just the statistics of the mothers who've had to leave work, that has just been ridiculous. So I just felt like this conversation was incredibly timely, and um, again, it's a personal like one-to-one thing. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I'm so grateful that you just were able to take the time out. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And again, if anyone wants to have these career chats, wants to practice career chats with me around these topics or any topics, I'm always welcome to chat.
Perfect. Yeah. So I will link your just your handle so everyone can follow you. And that is all. Have just the best day. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. You have a good one. Bye.